Next up, before we break for coffee, we have our first thought leadership spotlight of the day, and it's titled, What Do Working Parents Really Want? In this presentation, we'll explore what it takes to retain working parents and caregivers, so many of whom have been unbelievably stressed during the pandemic, and bring back those who left the workforce. And what can we do to help do that? So please welcome to the stage Shauna Cour. She's Vice President of Employer Sales at Ovia Health, which is the family health benefits platform. Shauna, take it away. Here is your
Thank you.
device.
I didn't realize I was standing between you and coffee, so I'll try and be engaging, keep you awake. Okay, so for those of you that don't know Ovia Health, we are a women's and family health benefit digital healthcare company based out of Boston. And we work with women and families from pre-family planning all the way now through menopause. We just launched a menopause solution. So happy to be here today. It's so great to see people and talk to people and learn again. And wear real pants and, do all of my hair, not just the Zoom part of it. So thank you for being here with me. So what I want to jump into is, oops. Oh, good. I paid attention. Okay. So one of the things that, we've obviously heard so much about already today, and I love that HR has taken something that maybe was branded negatively, like the Great Resignation, and already I think we've heard 6 or 7 different ways to look at that. Great reassessment, realignment, rotation, all sorts of different variables there. And you can see here, from Ovia's perspective, we wanted to understand what does that look like for working parents and primarily for moms. So I'm going to get into some research you'll see was primarily working mothers. But we know that over 3.5 million moms left the workforce since COVID hit. And I can speak from personal experience. I left my previous employer in April, and I left without a new job lined up. And I knew I'd be okay because digital healthcare is kind of a big deal right now. So I knew that I'd land somewhere great, but I just needed to take a break. I needed to breathe. I needed to focus on one of my kids that needed a lot of help. And so I took a few months off. And at Ovia, we're seeing the impact of that. If we just look alone at our coaching support and usage, we've had over 200% increase in coaching from our users. And so, you can see things like 32% of people left because of childcare issues. I know in our parenting solution, we were seeing up to 130 times usage per month per user. Which normally we were at about 70 for that solution. So again, people just needing and desperate for support. And burnout, right? I mean, how much are HR people hearing about burnout? I'm a stat there too, that people needed a break, right? And so what are the primary reasons people are leaving? No big surprise here. Like I mentioned, childcare, work-life balance and their health, culture, inclusion, the war on talent. You'll see as we get into the data here, how that was coming out in the work that we did in a survey with the business group on health. And also, I should mention, so we've been around for about 10 years, and because of that, we've got the largest women's and family health database in the country, and that affords us over 40 great partnerships with research and academic institutions to do really great work and help really try and progress women in the workplace and the support that families need. All right, so we wanted to figure out what does the future of family-friendly look like, right? We've already talked today about what does work in general look like as we move forward, and how are there things that we've learned since COVID hit that we don't go back from, right? That we somehow adapt to and integrate moving forward. And we wanted to look at that really from the perspective of working families. And so we launched this survey with a big group of people you'll see here, really across all sorts of different industries, all different levels of jobs from entry level to C-level, all across the country. You can see primarily, we're looking at that 26 to 40 age group, and no surprise that it was primarily moms that we were surveying. Some dads, but primarily moms. And so I'll start with the good news. And you should really relish this because there's not a lot of good news after this. But so do you think your company is a good place to work for new parents? So for those that said yes to this, they were far more likely to stay at their employer for 1 year postpartum. If you said no to this, you were far more likely to leave within the year after having a child. And some of the other things to look at here that I was honestly pretty surprised by, 45% of moms saying they came back to work because they wanted to progress their career. 35% saying they came back because they loved their job or employer. Now, the biggest bucket, no surprise, was financial. But people could choose multiple items, and we're seeing that, job satisfaction and job progress and career progression is really important, and I'll dive deep into that as we keep going. Now, one of the things I want to make sure you know as we get into the data here is that of the people responding, 84% had some amount of paid leave, and that's going to be important for you to remember as we get into this because leave is a big deal for people, no surprise. And the average amount of leave was 9 weeks of those surveyed, paid leave. All right, so the first thing we did is ask people, what could your employer have done differently? Now, I'm sure a lot of you have heard the information around people are starting to leave their companies because of benefits, right? It used to be largely because of compensation, but now benefits have become a really big deal, and culture and all of these other factors. And so when we look at the, far and away, the top thing here, paid parental leave was what people wanted, what they felt like their employer could have done differently. But then you see lots of different options here. We've talked already a little bit today about flexible scheduling, hybrid work, being creative there. Child care support, some companies have this. It's still somewhat of a luxury for a lot of companies. And then, the thing about this too to look at is this pre-birth planning and return to work planning. So the good news here is that those are things that you can do without spending a lot of money, right? These are about awareness, about communication. One of the things that employers have done such an incredible job with the last number of years is building out really robust benefit ecosystems. But what happens then is all you're doing is adding so much noise and complexity too for people to navigate. And just help them understand. And we'll dive deep into this too as we keep going. And then obviously some other, really important things, a topic we'll hit on here too is inclusion as we keep going. Then we gave them 40 different factors to consider and what mattered most to them. So again, there's a theme, better leave policies. And this is your warning that in just a few slides here, I'm going to get into some math. I'll keep it simple because I know that you haven't had that next cup of coffee, but just be prepared. And then looking at culture, flexible schedules, return to work prep, understanding benefits, lactation room quality, mental health, clearly one that any HR practitioner is hearing so much about in the last few years and that employers are really starting to support. And coaching programs. Hopefully by now most companies are having some type of coaching programs in place, but those have become really critical, particularly for that working parent audience. All right, so let's dive into these 4 different buckets here. So we're going to start with looking at leave and what you can do there, because I want to make this actionable so you really feel like you can understand what you can do. Making things easy to understand. And then next we'll go into ensuring that you're flexible, and last, investing in family benefits and culture. All right, this is the math part, so buckle up. All right, so think about your leave policies, right? Oftentimes what we can do in HR is think specifically about leave and look only at the budget specifically around that, right? And think, okay, if today we're offering, let's use the example of the average user within the survey, 9 weeks paid leave. And maybe you want to consider taking that up to 15 weeks paid leave. But then you do that math, and that gets expensive quickly. If you're at a medium to large size business, enterprise business, and you've got a lot of people having babies, right? That can add up. But one of the things to think about is let's take an average employee that's making, and I know this is high average, but to keep it somewhat simple, $75,000 a year. So if they get, let's say, 3 months paid leave, 12 weeks, and we're looking at $18,000, they then take FMLA leave, right? Another $18,000 to the employer just in terms of backfilling that work, productivity costs, right? But then you also have the 18 weeks that they were paid, that you are another $18,000 in terms of just covering that work, right? So total productivity of 6 months needs to be covered. So right there, you're at $56,000. And again, you could hear that and think, wow, that's a lot to pay for one person's leave. However, we know the stats right now. People are leaving. Women are not coming back to work after having a baby largely. And so what that means is, historically, we all know also that stat of, the replacement cost is 1.5 to 2 times somebody's salary. Well, I don't know if any of you are trying to hire right now. I'll tell you, it's not even 2 times. Like, I've had a role on my team open for a year, and I've interviewed great people, but trying to compete with some of these salaries, particularly in the digital healthcare space, it's tricky right now. And so I would say that replacement cost is probably getting closer to 2.5 to 3 times. So you're not looking, that $56,000 may sound like a lot, but replacement cost is going to be well above $150,000 for that person. So if you really sit back and look at the retention costs there, that math actually pans out pretty quickly. And think about, too, offering additional health and parenting support, right? Things where people come back and they've got a return to work coach. People have, their specific type of communities they can connect with, right? Hopefully everybody has ERGs by now. If you don't, you should catch up. But, in terms of just having them come back and feel like they're supported. And we'll get into what it looks like in terms of supporting them before they've even left. But, really think about what you can do with your leave to make it more friendly. I know for me, I was very fortunate that I had all 3 of my babies when I was at Microsoft, and I had 20 weeks paid leave for each of my kids, which was incredible. And I call them babies, but they're 16, 19, and 22. But that was amazing, right? And that was a long time ago. I mean, again, I'll do this math for you. 99 was when I had my first baby, and I had almost 5 months off, and that was incredible. None of my friends had that at the time. It made me, I stayed there for 12 years. It made me feel so loyal to Microsoft because they gave me this time with this human that I so desperately wanted to be with every second. Okay, and then getting into making benefits understandable. Okay, now I don't want to offend anybody, but because I'm sure many of you work on open enrollment, but oftentimes that conversation is a one-time of year conversation for those that are electing their benefits, right? And while it may be an everyday conversation for you within HR, people often only want to have to think about that once. And that's often because it's difficult and it's complex. And so think about, how do you make it a more frequent conversation? Think about that benefits checklist, right? We know since COVID, families are looking for much more creative approaches to their benefits, right? Things like, not to toot our horn, but things like Ovia, things, like childcare support, coaching, all these types of things that they need more than ever. So help people understand the language, right? Have a monthly spotlight on, let's say family benefits and what's available to you, so people understand how to navigate that. And once it gets to open enrollment, they're educated about what they need and what they want and what they don't want too. And then tap into those community groups, those ERGs. I know Shauna was talking about all the listing tools they have at Expedia. Surely so many of you have those as well. Think about, how can you get in front of those people? Talk about, what is it do you need that we're not providing today? What does that look like? How do we build that? And have them have a seat at the table, right? Be part of that discussion with you. Okay, and then looking at flexibility, so hybrid remote options, flexible work. For a lot of companies, I know this isn't feasible, right? But think even outside the box in terms of, let's say if you're in the healthcare space and you, have nurses on staff, and maybe you can't provide them the opportunity to pick their shifts every week, but maybe 1 week out of the month. Or maybe they get to, you think more creatively around, how do you get people to have more 10-hour shifts or 12-hour shifts so they can have an extra day off a week. Just thinking about things that maybe you didn't think were feasible, but we've been forced into thinking about what was impossible before and making it possible. I know when again, going back to my time at Microsoft, I came back to work, and it was in this era of, and again, I've dated myself so many times already, but the dot-com bubble. And here in Seattle, if you were here during that time, it was crazy. It was madness. And so Microsoft was bleeding women, couldn't hold on to women because there were so many opportunities. And I came back, and I was working. I'm sure many of you did this when your kids were young, if you have them, and working ridiculous hours where I can look back now and think, God, I regret some of those choices I made. But I happened to work in a team that nobody had kids, let alone they weren't even married or had partners. So I was like this foreign alien to people. And I would sneak out the back stairs and around the side of the building to the parking lot so that I could get home and see my baby for an hour before he'd go to sleep. And I was miserable because of that. And while I was grateful to have the time off that I'd had, I also knew the balance I was living wasn't right. And so I was fortunate enough that because of that dot-com bubble, Microsoft launched the first ever flexible work arrangement. And I happened to be the guinea pig at the time for our chief people officer. And, I remember the first week that I started this new role. I had moved out of product and into HR for a people research team, working for Dr. Laura Hamill, if anybody knows her. She's brilliant and amazing. And I remember the first week it happened, literally feeling like the skies parted, the gods had spoken, and this was the balance I was meant to have. I knew I wasn't built to be a stay-at-home mom, but I also knew that I wasn't meant to be working 60, 70 hours a week with a baby at home. So think about the impact that those types of programs can have on people's lives and their families. And then gradual return. Think about, can you get people back to work at 75% for the first month? These things that may seem small, actually, if you've been the beneficiary of these types of programs, they're huge for people. We've talked some today about showing care and feeling care. This is all about how people feel, right? So you can talk a good game in your policies and benefits and your culture and your values all day long, but if people don't feel it, if it's not real and genuine, then it's not happening. Okay, and then family-friendly culture. So destigmatize parenting. It's interesting how, and I think the world had started to shift before COVID somewhat, but this idea of keeping work and personal life separate, and trying to be very professional, buttoned up, and not necessarily talking about the chaos behind the scenes at home. The chaos has now been exposed, right? The curtains have been pulled back, and everybody sees the reality of our lives, and we're all in the same boat, right? Whether you have kids or pets or whatever it is, there's some level of chaos in everybody's life. So let's just realize that this is normal. And talk about the parenting trade-offs and such. I know at my previous employer that I left in April, we started having, once COVID hit, having these, just sessions where you could come together and talk, parenting groups. And it was incredible. I remember being on some of these calls and thinking, I'll just join today, I've got a few minutes. And the next thing you know, I'd be crying on there because of what I was going through with my own child that I was trying to mask and not share. But all of a sudden then I realized all these other people were going through similar types of struggles with their kids too. Looking at your policies and are they inclusive? Okay, this is huge. So, and I didn't even learn this until I came to Ovia, but, for instance, let's look at an infertility benefit. If you've got infertility benefits through a carrier, oftentimes the way that those benefits are written, or those policies are written through a carrier, are so that if you are deemed medically unable of getting pregnant, then you get to utilize the benefit. Well, by the nature of that, right, if you're a single mom, a single dad, a same-sex couple, you don't get to use the infertility benefit. So look at your policies and really think about, are they inclusive of all different types of people and families, right? Step-parents and just blended families, all types of different families today that people have. And your benefits should, again, be catching up to what today looks like in the family space. And then celebrate and support families. I have a really big thing that any manager that I have, and even any person that I work closely with, you should know my kids' names. And I should know your kids' names. And so whenever I start, somebody new starts on my team, the first one-on-one we have is I want to know about their family. That's the very first thing I want to care about. I want to hear about their kids. I want to see their kids. And And it's a red flag to me. If I've got a manager that after a certain amount of time doesn't know my kids' names, the 3 humans, the 3 things in the world that mean the most to me, there's a problem, because then you don't really care about me. So celebrate families. You know, hopefully, most days I do feel like my family's incredible, not all, but so I want others to be in that with me and to celebrate that with me. And that is everything for today. So thank you so much for listening, and I would love to catch up with so many of you. I see so many familiar faces, so thank you for being here.